Hello, it's delighting to see you again in the weekend edition of Into Vietnam, which summarizes the most outstanding macroeconomic events in the past week, following our major stories. 862 billion dong of the Realty Bailout Fund is disbursed as of January the 15th. People flock to gold shops on the God of Wealth Day. The Vietnamese government decision to raise the ownership limit for strategic foreign investors in local banks will be in the focus on this week's business talk, which is joined by Mr. Adam Sikoff, the CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam. Let's begin with this week's figure. According to the latest report from the Housing and Real Estate Market Administration, Ministry of Construction, as of January the 15, 2014, 862 billion dong or 2.8% of the housing support package have been disbursed. In detail, the State Bank of Vietnam has documents confirming registration of loan contracts for 15 businesses with 1.4 trillion dong, of which 380 billion dong have been disbursed to 8 businesses. For individual customers, 5 banks have had loans commitment to 1,994 customers with about 720 billion dong, of which nearly 482 billion dong have been disbursed. Earlier, Deputy Prime Minister Hoàng Trung Hải also directed the MOC to coordinate with relevant agencies to continue to implement policies on long-term credit and financial support for the development of social housing, low-price commercial housing and rental housing, especially speeding up the disbursement of the 30 trillion dong social housing support package. The Mekong Delta region is striving to raise its annual average per capita income to 37 million dong or roughly $1,740 in 2014, up 6.9% from the previous year. To reach the goal, regional provinces will diversify their farm produce and cultivate high-yield and quality trees, especially rice, fruit trees, and short-term industrial plants. The localities will also focus on growing plants that can be served as materials for industrial production and producing animal feed, while heating aquaculture and agro-fishery processing. Industrial development, especially small and medium-sized industry, has been also included in the plan. Mekong Delta will tap its gas potential to develop the gas-powered fertilizer sectors, and the region will give more importance to the development of industrial parks and maritime transports. Other prioritized sectors include trade, service, and tourism, particularly ecotourism. Vietnam's steel industry might achieve 6 to 7% growth this year if the stagnant market is revived. This year, the Vietnam Steel Corporation has set a target of producing nearly 1.5 million tons of steel billets and 2.6 million tons of rolled steel, year-on-year rise of 24.5% and 8% increase respectively. The Vietnam Steel Association Chairman Hồ Nghĩa Dũng says the economic growth must reach 5.6 to 8% first, then the steel industry will be able to achieve 6 to 7% growth. In 2014, the Ministry of Industry and Trade will also introduce measures to resolve the difficulties facing the sector. It will work with the Ministry of Finance to help enterprises access more capital to promote their production and business. Coming up next is some major macroeconomic and investment news. Gold retail trading surged sharply as many seekers of good fortune queued in long lines outside local shops to buy precious metal on the God of Wealth Day. It's believed that buying gold on this day, when the God of Wealth returns to heaven, will bring good luck and prosperity throughout the year. In Hanoi, everybody bought gold on the day, including traders, office workers, and even housewives.
Trong cả năm mình đi làm mình cũng đã dành dụm và tích cóp được một khoản rồi, thì đầu năm mình đến tiệm vàng để mình mua để cho nó được may mắn cả năm.
Thực ra thì đấy nó cũng là cái tâm lý chung của
The rising demand for gold pushed the gold prices up in Ho Chi Minh City, but the price in Hanoi was relatively stable. Lightweight gold bars from 1 to 5 marks reported so well on the day.
Mình đang muốn mua một cái nhẫn tròn đầu năm làm sao cứ 10 phân vẹn 10.
Cho nên đặc biệt là cái dòng sản phẩm nhẫn tròn trơn của Phú Quý thì bán rất tốt. Và thường mọi người tập trung vào mua hai cái loại sản phẩm nhẫn tròn 0,5 chỉ và 1 chỉ rất nhiều.
Ngày Tần Tài chúc nhà nhà may mắn, người người phát tài.
Buying precious metal on the God of Wealth Day is a good tradition, and hopefully good luck will follow people on the year. The General Customs Department reported tax collection by the end of January 2014 stood at 61.5 trillion dong, or 104.8% of the same period last year, and equivalent to 9.9% of the whole year plan. Of the total domestic collection, were estimated at more than 53 trillion dong, up 5.7% on year. Revenues from crude oil hit 8.2 trillion dong, or 9.6% of year plan. The department sees this as a good result, thanks to improvements in the economy at the end of last year and beginning of this year. The determination to tighten budget collection measures at the start of the year also contributed to the rise of state revenues. Earlier, the Finance Ministry announced Vietnam's budget will hit more than 782 trillion dong and budget deficit to stand at 224 trillion dong, or 5.3% of GDP. In its report on 2014 outlook, the VCBS says Vietnam's economy to grow at faster pace than previous year at 5.6 to 5.7%. The VCBS forecast 2014 will continue to be a tough year with the economy, as it must focus on the task of stabilizing macroeconomy, control inflation, and maintain prosperous growth. This is partly due to the state expenditure will be raised, following the raise of state budget deficit to 5.3% of GDP in 2014. This should have good impacts on the economy in the context of slow recovery of local demand. The securities company also expects the resolution of non-performing loans as well as good control over inflation will be the base for stronger development of the private sector, creating boosts for the economy in the year. VCBS forecasts there won't be unexpected changes in Vietnam's inflation, which will stood at around 5.5 to 6%. The company says the forex market will remain stable without any shocks, as in 2013, and the Vietnam Dong US dollar exchange rate will be gradually adjusted up by 2% by the end of the year. In its report on rapid growth markets, Ernst & Young foresees a positive outlook for Vietnam's economy in upcoming years, with GDP growth recovering to 5.4% in 2014 after lingering around 5% in the past 2 years. Considering the government's ongoing efforts in slashing budget deficit, inflation and lending interest rates, the agency believes Vietnam's economy to hit its peak up 7% by 2016. Ernst & Young report states strong commitments of foreign direct investment should help to dampen investor worries about the instability of Vietnam dong. The shift of FDI out of agriculture and textile sectors is expected to cause trade deficit to the country in the final quarter of this year. Ernst & Young report on hot risk in its report shows Vietnam ranks the 4th out of 25 rapid growing markets, which are the most vulnerable to 7 risky elements of trade imbalance, foreign debts, public debts, inflation, credit growth, forex reserves, and currency instability. As of January the 20th, credit were estimated to shrink by 1.21%, while deposit fell 0.98%. The Ministry of Planning and Investment said total means of payment were estimated to rise 0.82% compared to December 2013. Slow credit growth has brought concern about achieving credit growth target of 12 to 14% this year. An executive of a joint stock commercial bank says state-owned banks dominate the credit market. Therefore, in order to promote credit of the whole system, it just requires big banks to disperse to key projects. For the reason, the credit growth figure does not reflect the health of the entire economy. The ANZ has released its latest report on Vietnam's economic outlook in 2014, which states that the country is a lucrative destination for international investors, considering its stable macroeconomic environment, improved economic growth, and stable exchange rate. The bank says the bright spots of the economy in the first month of 2013 mainly came from external factors, with FDI at $400 million and $465 million of FDI was disbursed. It believed, with the improved regulatory environment for investors and the stepping up of negotiations of key trade pacts, the FDI flows will be constant, helping to support exports in mid-term. At the same time, ANZ kept its outlook for Vietnam's economy, with GDP growth of 5.6 to 5.8% and inflation at 7.5 to 8%, which is higher than the country's target of 7%, given that the government is pursuing loosening its monetary policies to boost public investment. According to a decree drafted by the Ministry of Planning and Investment, the state will hold 75% of stake in the enterprises dealing with oil and natural gas production, distribution of oil products, mining coal, iron and copper ores, airport management and telecom network infrastructure. The government will only own the entire share of enterprises that directly serve the country's national defense purposes, as well as those that operate the national grid and railway, operate flights, print money and produce media contents. The government will hold a 50 to 65% stake in businesses operating in the fields of transportation, credit, finance, coffee, rubber, and urban lighting, irrigation, and sanitation. Under a master plan recently announced by the Prime Minister, 500 state-run enterprises in Vietnam will be privatized from now to 2015. It's time for some foreign trade news. The Vietnam Food Association announced Vietnam rice exports stood at more than 307,000 tons in January, valued at $127.5 million, down 24.1% in volume and 30.5% in value. The VFA estimated around 300 to 500,000 tons of rice are expected to be shipped in February. The VFA says despite attaining the set plan, rice exports in January hit a record low due to the lack of demand from traditional markets. Major trade partners like China and Africa are waiting for upcoming winter-spring crops. However, border trade exports with China began to rebound after Lunar New Year. The General Statistics Office reported Vietnam spent $58 million in the first month of 2014 to buy some 3,000 automobiles from abroad, with the value up 10%, while the volume remaining unchanged from the same period last year. Compared to December 2013, automobile imports plunged 25% in volume and 30% in value. The pause caused by Tết holiday has had negative impacts on importing activities by Vietnamese businesses, which contributes to the decline of Vietnam's automobile turnover in the first month. Local automotive companies say they are expecting positive changes in the market and considering it a sign of the country's economic recovery.
According to the General Statistics Office, the steel trade deficit stood at around $340 million in January, down by 80% against the same period of 2013. Last month, steel exports hit 150,000 tons, worth $110 million, down nearly 35% year-on-year, while imports reached 650,000 tons with a total value of $450 million. In the month, local steel industry turned out around 196,000 tons, a 22% year-on-year decrease given the traditional Lunar New Year holiday. The majority of local steel firms would maintain production at only 60 to 70% capacity during the first months of this year due to low market demands.
The Vietnamese government decision to increase stake ownership limits in local firms for international investors has been in the media spotlight since the end of 2013. The decision is believed to have attracted more capital from foreign individual and organizational investors. However, it's also a source of concern as the matter depends on the securities market and local firms and has little to do with the demand for more ownership from foreign investors. A lot of people believe that the raise of foreign ownership limit in local firms will help increase the stock market's liquidity, attract more funds from overseas, and hence encourage more local investors to join the market.
Là sẽ mở rộng cái room, không những là room cho các cái doanh nghiệp viễn thông rồi là ngân hàng, mà còn là nới rộng là cái việc mà để cho cái thành phần các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài tham gia vào thị trường chứng khoán không bị hạn chế nữa, thì như vậy là rất tốt. Nới room cho các cái doanh nghiệp lớn.
Nhà đầu tư cái khả năng huy động vốn của các công ty trong nước, các doanh nghiệp niêm yết và những cái quỹ đầu tư sẽ dễ dàng hơn. Và một cái điểm nữa là khi mà cái cơ cấu sở hữu của các doanh nghiệp thay đổi theo chiều hướng là có sự tham gia nhiều hơn của các nhà đầu tư tổ chức, nhà đầu tư nước ngoài, thì cái sự minh bạch và cái sự chuyên nghiệp nó sẽ được tăng lên rất là nhiều. Đây cũng là một cái, chúng tôi nghĩ rằng là nó là một cái chính sách mà sẽ thúc đẩy cái sự tăng trưởng của thị trường chứng khoán trong thời gian tới.
The government's decision will also benefit local companies as this helps them to have more capital for their operations, improve their management capacities, get transfer technologies, make the information more transparent, and raise the whole nation's commitments in the processing of joining WTO.
Thật ra thì đối với đứng ở doanh nghiệp thì bình đẳng với tất cả các nhà đầu tư, cho nên là việc nhà đầu tư nước ngoài sở hữu hay việc nhà đầu tư trong nước sở hữu thì đối với cả những người làm quản trị SSI hay với tên nghĩa là chủ tịch SSI, tôi thấy không có vấn đề gì. Nước ngoài sở hữu cũng tốt mà trong nước sở hữu cũng tốt. Tất nhiên khi mà mở room, nhà đầu tư nước ngoài có thể tham gia nhiều hơn thì có thể nghĩ đến một những phương án tốt hơn cho việc mà phát hành mới để thu hút thêm vốn đầu tư cho SSI để có thể tham gia thị trường này. Tôi nghĩ đấy là một giải pháp tốt cho SSI.
Based on the demand and supply rule, the decision to raise the room for international investors means Vietnam will give up 10% of local stake to foreign investors. Will this make any difference? Some local experts voiced that local firms should add more transparency to their operations and management instead of creating more room for foreign ones.
Mở room nó có một cái quan trọng, tức là các nhà đầu tư người ta nước ngoài sẽ có cơ hội để tham gia vào những cổ phiếu đó. Thế tuy nhiên thì về nguyên tắc thì hỏi nó có thực sự hoàn toàn chỉ là điều tốt không thì cũng chưa chắc. Vì khi mà tất cả những doanh nghiệp mà tốt hơn thì các nhà đầu tư nước ngoài người ta lại sở hữu. Còn chúng ta thì lại chỉ quay lại với những doanh nghiệp mà không tốt thì cũng không hẳn là một cái điều thì quá tốt. Hơn nữa là cái việc mà hôm nay nới room ra thì có room, nhưng mà cũng chỉ rất nhanh thôi nó lại hết room. Thì sau khi hết room rồi thì bây giờ thì 49%, rồi đến 70%, rồi đến 99% thì cũng có ngày đã hết room. Thế thì cái vấn đề câu chuyện của chúng ta không phải là như thế nào, mà vấn đề của chúng ta là làm thế nào để cho thị trường minh bạch và thu hút được nhiều nguồn vốn đầu tư vào thị trường, bao gồm cả trong nước và ngoài nước, chứ không đơn thuần chỉ là một vài công ty tốt nới room để thu hút vốn rất nhanh cho đầy room của các tổ chức nước ngoài.
In fact, the sudden loosening of room can cause a shock over the market. In 2007, when Vietnam joined the WTO, registered FDI surged to $60 billion, and the disbursement also rocketed. The economy was under huge pressure, with credit jumping by 53% in the year and maintained at 23% 1 year later. Something should be drawn from the lesson. It's necessary to control the flow of foreign funds into Vietnam, especially in the context of tremendous complexities of the funds, as the financial market is getting bigger and more complicated. Raising the ownership limits for strategic foreign investors in local banks has been in debate for a long time in a bid to leave foreign funds for national development. At the end of 2013, the Vietnamese government issued Decree No. 1 on raising the limit of foreign investors in local banks from 15 to 20%. VITV reporter had a talk with Mr. Adam Sitkoff, CEO of the American Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam about this. More to follow.
Mr. Adam, thank you very much for joining our interview today. And we know that recently the government has imposed a Decree 01 related to open room for foreigners investing in the banking system in Vietnam from 15% to 20%. So what could you comment about the action of the government?
Well, we think it's an important first step. This doesn't solve Vietnam's banking system problems. There are a few problems from the perspective of foreign investors. Number one is the issue of non-performing loans. How big are they and what can be done about them? We'd like to see more transparency in the system so that people can tell the real situation of how healthy these banks are. We'd also like to see additional steps. The banking system and the loans and the balance sheets, they need to be cleaned up. And what this decree that starts on February 20th does, it doesn't all of a sudden make Vietnam's banks so attractive that all the foreigners want to rush in and buy part of these banks. For example, you can own up to 49% in Thailand, and if you get permission, you can own even more. There are foreign banks that own up to over 70% of some of the Thai banks, and that was done mostly as a means of injecting needed capital, but I think Vietnam will get there, and so this is a good first step.
Which impact do you think that the decree could bring to the banking system in Vietnam, especially for the weak banks?
And to get these assets performing again, and to get the banks moving, because we need to see credit growth, we need to see economic growth. Ultimately, that's what creates opportunities for jobs and wealth for the 91 million Vietnamese people that live here.
However, the decree requires some limited conditions related to the total and real assets foreigners have. So, what do you think that is could affect to the decision of investing of foreigners in the banking system in Vietnam?
Well, the decree sets a ceiling on assets and says that you can only buy into these banks if you have over 20 billion in assets, let's say. Okay, there are some smaller banks and investors that are going to be shut out of that market, but it's not unusual for a country to set that type of regulatory requirement. Really what Vietnam's doing is it's trying to say we only want to attract big and strong banks that are going to be around for a while. Personally, I don't think the requirement's needed, because really what you want is you want to attract as much interest as you can to help the country capitalize investment to solve this problem. So I don't think that having that 20 billion in asset floor is very helpful. But regulators all over the world decide on who can buy in and what types of companies they want to allow.
The last question, in the point of view, which next step do you think that the government do to after imposing the Decree 01?
We want to see a loosening of regulations. We want to see an opening up of markets, because then you get the best deal, like anything else. If you go outside and you're trying to buy fruit on the street this week. You hope that more than one person is selling it, otherwise you're going to have to pay a really high price. And what we see in terms of potential investors in the banking system is Vietnam should want anybody that's interested in investing in this banking system, anyone that's interested in coming to help solve this problem, that can then get economic activity moving and growth at a more normal place. Anyone that's interested should be invited to come, and if they don't meet requirements or they're not qualified, those deals can be turned down. But we'd like to see great international interest in this, because Vietnam's got a bright future, and foreign investors want to be in Vietnam because they know that there are 91 million people here who have a lot of opportunity and a good future ahead of them, and it's just a question of, can the government create the right business environment by its rules? And what we've seen, not just in the banking system, has been kind of a tightening of rules and things that have made foreign investors scratch their head and feel maybe their investment's not wanted in Vietnam. And these could be anything like Decree 181 on advertising right now, which is very harmful to some of the foreign companies that want to help Vietnamese companies get their products and goods sold. And we see Decree 102 that has to deal with work permits and visas, and still other leftover policies that are making people think that maybe it's better if I go invest in the Philippines. Maybe it's time for me to look at Myanmar. We don't want that. At the American Chamber of Commerce, we want people to invest in Vietnam. But I can't force anybody to come here and buy into a Vietnamese bank. The government has to set the right types of regulations. The government has to deal with the right type of business climate to create the conditions where people say Vietnam is a safe place for me to put money, and Vietnam's a place where my money can grow so that I can also see some opportunity. And when we have that kind of climate, as we had a number of years ago, we'll see that opportunity really grows for Vietnamese people and Vietnamese businesses.
Once again, thank you very much for being with us today.
As usual, the final part is the summary of the local securities market during the week. And that's all for now. Thank you so much for your attention. For comments and feedbacks, you can reach us via email at intovietnam@vitv.vn or give us a call at 0422 08288. Goodbye for now.